Chapter 1. A Strange New World. Arrival at the Galactic Crater. The Galactic Crater, a sprawling megastructure floating at the edge of the Selene Nebula, was a marvel of interstellar engineering. Built into the remains of a long-dead star, its rotating rings housed millions of inhabitants and visitors. From luxury merchants to gritty bounty hunters, every imaginable species passed through its shimmering gates. Bright holograms and neon signs lit the corridors, advertising everything from exotic goods to companionship services tailored to the preferences of every species. Elliot Mercer, a young human trader from Earth, had never seen anything like it. As his small ship docked in Ring 7, the trade hub of the crater, he marveled at the sheer scale of the place. Towering spires reached into artificial skies projected by the station's ceiling, while fleets of drones zipped between them, delivering goods. The air was filled with a mix of languages and scent-sweet spices from Osel markets, metallic tangs of machinery, and the unmistakable musk of alien bodies. Elliot had come to the crater to finalize a lucrative trade deal on Denzonite crystals, rare minerals used in the construction of warp drives. It was the kind of deal that could set him up for years, and he had dressed the part-pressed black jacket, polished boots, and a confident swagger he didn't entirely feel. The negotiations had gone smoothly, and Elliot found himself with a fat credit chip in his pocket and a few days to kill before his ship would be loaded. Wandering the crater's endless corridors, he stumbled upon the Blue Solarium, a restaurant so exclusive its neon sign barely bothered to advertise. The Blue Solarium. The restaurant's exterior was minimalist compared to the loud chaos of the marketplace. Its door was made of opaque black material, flanked by two towering security droids whose glowing red eyes followed every passerby. A sleek holographic interface projected the menu in an alien script, which automatically translated when Elliot approached. The cuisine was described as galactically unique, offering dishes crafted from ingredients imported from across the known universe. The prices were astronomical, but Elliot's recent deal had left him feeling bold. A droid attendant greeted him as he stepped inside. Its voice was smooth and melodic, programmed for elegance. "Welcome to the Blue Solarium, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "No, but I'd like to try the house special," Elliot replied. "Something rare." The droid tilted its head, its sensors scanning him. "Rare, indeed. Please follow me." Elliot was led into the restaurant's main dining area, a luxurious space with shimmering walls that shifted colors like a flowing aurora. The air was cool, infused with a subtle floral aroma, and soft instrumental music played from unseen speakers. Tables floated slightly above the ground, and the chairs adjusted to the physiology of each guest. Around him, aliens of every shape and size dined, some dipping elongated appendages into bowls of steaming liquids, others slicing through unidentifiable meats with precision tools. The droid seated him at a table near a massive viewport overlooking the nebula. Elliot couldn't help but admire the view as a Cerverae humanoid alien with shimmering silver skin approached. "What can I get for you, sir?" she asked, her voice lilting. Elliot leaned back, flashing what he hoped was a charming smile. "I'm in the mood for something unique, something rare." The server's lips curved into a faint smile, her skin flickering with light. "You'll want the chef's select. It's sourced fresh from a distant system. Shall I place the order?" "Do it," Elliot said, excitement bubbling in his chest. The dish arrives. As he waited, Elliot sipped on a glass of bright blue liquid, which tasted like a mix of citrus and something effervescent. He watched the other patrons, trying to guess what each dish might be. Some looked like oversized fruits, others like writhing masses of tentacles that diners ate live. Finally, the server returned, pushing a floating tray covered with a silver dome. She set it before him with a flourish, her smile widening. "Your chef's select, sir. Fresh, rare, and alive." Elliot blinked, confused. "Alive?" The server lifted the dome, and Elliot's breath caught in his throat. Lying on the tray was a humanoid figure, a young alien woman, her skin a deep cerulean hue that shimmered under the lights. Her features were delicate but distinctly otherworldly, with large, luminescent eyes and elongated ears. She wore a thin, silken garment that barely covered her, and her wrists and ankles were bound with glowing restraints. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes wide with fear as she looked up at Elliot. What the hell is this? Elliot demanded, his voice louder than he intended. The server's smile didn't falter. The chef select, sir. A delicacy from the Tyvolan cluster. Prepared fresh for consumption. You expect me to eat her? Elliot said, horrified. The alien girl flinched at his words, her luminous eyes darting between him and the server. The server's expression turned puzzled, as if Elliot's reaction was unusual. Of course, sir. The chef select is reserved for our most esteemed guests. It is a privilege. Elliot pushed back from the table, his heart racing. This is insane. She's not food, she's a person. The server tilted her head, her skin flickering faintly. Tyvolans are bred specifically for consumption, sir. They are engineered to be docile and flavorful. I assure you, this is completely legal. The alien girl whimpered, her bound hands trembling as she struggled against the restraints. Her fear was palpable, and Elliot felt a surge of anger. Get her out of those restraints, he said firmly. Now. The server's smile faltered. I'm afraid that's against policy, sir. If you'd prefer a different preparation dash. I said get her out, Elliot snapped, rising from his seat. The entire restaurant seemed to go quiet as other patrons turned to watch. The server's pleasant demeanor vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. Sir, I must ask you to calm down. This establishment operates under the highest standards of intergalactic law. Elliot leaned closer, his voice low and dangerous. If you don't let her go, I'll make sure every authority in the Federation hears about this place. For a moment, there was a tense silence. Then the server sighed and gestured to a nearby droid. The restraints on the alien girl clicked open, and she scrambled off the tray, pressing herself against Elliot's side as if he were a shield. You've made a scene, sir, the server said, her voice icy. I suggest you leave before you cause further disruption. Gladly, Elliot said, wrapping an arm around the trembling girl to steady her. And trust me, this isn't over. A desperate escape. Elliot guided the alien girl out of the restaurant, her steps unsteady as she clung to him. As soon as they exited, she pulled away, her luminous eyes wide with a mix of fear and gratitude. Thank you, she stammered, her voice soft and melodic. Don't thank me yet, Elliot said, glancing over his shoulder. He could see the server speaking into a comm device, her expression furious. We need to get out of here. Now. The girl nodded, and together they hurried through the crowded corridors of the galactic crater. Elliot's mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. The Federation prided itself on its ethics and regulations. How could something like this exist under its jurisdiction? As they rounded a corner, Elliot spotted two security droids scanning the crowd. Their sleek forms were unmistakable, and they were heading straight for him. Great, he muttered. They're not going to let this go. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her into a side alley. What's your name? He asked as they ran. Lyria, she said breathlessly. All right, Lyria. Stick with me. I'll get us out of this. Behind them, the droid's mechanical voices echoed through the alley. Subject identified. Surrender immediately. Elliot cursed under his breath. He didn't know what he'd gotten himself into, but one thing was certain, he wasn't about to let Lyria end up back on that tray. Chapter 2. The Escape. Through the maze of the crater. Elliot's heart pounded as he dragged Lyria through the twisting corridors of Nebula Station 17. The galactic crater was a labyrinth of sleek passageways, glowing neon signs, and bustling alien travelers. But the looming presence of the security droids was impossible to ignore. Their mechanical voices echoed down the halls, growing louder with each passing moment. Target identified. Cease resistance. Lyria stumbled, her legs weak after who knew how long in captivity, but she clung tightly to Elliot's hand. Her luminescent eyes darted nervously, and her soft voice barely reached him over the din of the crowd. They're going to catch us, she said, her voice trembling. Not if I can help it, Elliot muttered. Just keep moving. They rounded a corner into a brightly lit market district, where merchants peddled wares from every corner of the galaxy. The crowd was dense, a chaotic blend of species haggling and shouting, and Elliot seized the opportunity to blend in. Pulling Lyria close, he guided her through the throng, weaving between stalls piled high with alien artifacts, shimmering fabrics, and unidentifiable foods. The droids were close now, their red optical sensors scanning the crowd. Elliot grabbed a discarded cloak from a stall, draping it over Lyria's shoulders to hide her distinctive blue skin. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "They're looking for you." Lyria nodded, her eyes wide with fear but filled with a flicker of trust. Elliot couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He'd been reckless, acting on instinct rather than strategy, and now they were both in danger. But there was no turning back now. Into the shadows. The market gave way to a series of dimly lit service tunnels, their walls streaked with grime and flickering lights. Elliot led Lyria deeper into the maze, hoping to put as much distance as possible between them and the droids. The air grew cooler, tinged with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen, and the hum of the station's machinery echoed around them. "Where are we going?" Lyria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a place I know," Elliot said. "A docking bay where my ship's waiting. If we can get there, we'll be safe." Lyria hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. You don't even know me. Why are you helping me?" Elliot stopped, turning to face her. "Because what they were doing to you is wrong. I don't care what the laws say, no one deserves to be treated like that." Lyria studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes searching his face. Then she nodded. "Thank you." Before Elliot could respond, the faint whir of droid servos reached his ears. His stomach dropped. "They're close," he said, grabbing her hand again. "Come on." Cornered. The tunnels narrowed, the walls closing in as Elliot and Lyria ran. They came to a junction, and Elliot hesitated, glancing down each corridor. Both seemed equally uninviting, but the sound of approaching droids forced his decision. "Left," he said, pulling Lyria into the darker of the two passages. The tunnel sloped downward, opening into a cavernous maintenance bay. Rows of disused machinery lined the walls, their surfaces coated in dust and grime. Elliot scanned the area, searching for a hiding spot, but the bay was too open. "Over there," Lyria whispered, pointing to a stack of crates near the far wall. They ducked behind the crates just as the droids entered the bay. Their glowing red sensors swept across the room, illuminating the shadows. Elliot held his breath, his heart hammering in his chest. Beside him, Lyria clutched the edges of the cloak tightly, her slender frame trembling. The droids moved methodically, their mechanical voices cutting through the silence. "Subjects detected in this area. Begin containment protocol." Elliot's mind raced. If they were caught, there was no telling what would happen to Lyria or to him. He needed a distraction, something to draw the droids away long enough for them to escape. His gaze fell on a nearby stack of metal pipes, precariously balanced on a rusted platform. An idea sparked in his mind, and he turned to Lyria. "Stay here," he whispered. "No matter what happens, don't move." Lyria's eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" Elliot didn't answer. He slipped out from behind the crates, keeping low as he crept toward the pipes. The droid sensors were focused on the far side of the bay, giving him just enough time to reach the platform. With a deep breath, he grabbed a wrench from the ground and swung it at the support beam. The pipes came crashing down with a deafening clang, the sound echoing through the bay. The droids whirled around, their sensors flaring. Unauthorized activity detected. Investigating. Elliot darted back toward the crates, grabbing Lyria's hand. "Let's go." A narrow escape. Elliot and Lyria bolted for the far end of the maintenance bay, where a rusted door stood partially ajar. Behind them, the droids gave chase, their metallic footsteps pounding against the floor. The door led to another series of tunnels, these ones even narrower and more decrepit than the last. The air was thick with dust, and the flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. "Almost there," Elliot panted, his grip on Lyria's hand firm. Finally, they emerged into a small, dimly lit docking bay. Elliot's ship, the Starhopper, sat in the center of the bay, its engines powered down but ready for takeoff. He rushed up the ramp, ushering Lyria inside before sealing the hatch behind them. "Strap in," he said, racing to the cockpit. "This is going to be rough." Lyria slid into the co-pilot's seat, her eyes wide as she watched him flip a series of switches. The ship's engines roared to life, and the docking bay trembled as the Starhopper lifted off. Just as they cleared the station's atmosphere, a warning alarm blared. Elliot glanced at the console, his stomach sinking. They've launched pursuit ships, he said. Hold on. Freedom. The Starhopper weaved through the station's security perimeter, dodging energy blasts from the pursuing ships. Elliot's hands flew across the controls, his focus unshakable. Beside him, Lyria gripped the edge of her seat, her fear palpable. Can't you go faster? She asked, her voice rising. Working on it, Elliot muttered. He pulled back on the throttle, sending the ship into a steep climb. The pursuing ships followed, their weapons firing relentlessly. As they reached the edge of the station's gravity well, Elliot activated the warp drive. The ship shuddered, and the stars outside the viewport stretched into elongated streaks of light. They were free. Lyria slumped in her seat, her body trembling with relief. We made it, she whispered. Elliot nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Yeah, we made it. A new mission. As the Starhopper cruised through the quiet void of space, Elliot turned to Lyria. All right, now that we're not being chased, care to tell me what's going on? Why were they serving you as food? Lyria hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. My people. We were conquered by a species that sees us as nothing more than resources. Those who aren't enslaved are consumed. Elliot's jaw tightened. That's barbaric. It's reality, Lyria said softly. But you saved me. Why? Elliot met her gaze, his expression earnest. Because it was the right thing to do. No one deserves to be treated like that. Lyria smiled faintly, her luminous eyes shimmering with gratitude. Thank you, Elliot. I don't know how I'll repay you, but I'll find a way. Elliot leaned back in his seat, a new determination forming in his mind. You don't owe me anything, but maybe we can figure out how to help the rest of your people. Lyria's eyes widened. You do that? Elliot grinned. What can I say? I've got a thing for impossible missions. The two of them stared out at the endless expanse of stars, their journey just beginning. Chapter 3. A dangerous pursuit. A beacon of trouble. The Starhopper cruised through the void of space, its engines humming softly. For a brief moment, Elliot and Lyria enjoyed the quiet, a rare respite from the chaos of their escape from Nebula Station 17. But the silence didn't last long. Warning. Unidentified signal detected, the ship's computer announced, breaking the calm. Elliot's fingers flew across the console. The Starhopper's sensors displayed a faint blip, a nearby ship broadcasting a coded signal. His stomach tightened as the blip grew brighter, signaling its approach. They found us, he muttered. Lyria leaned forward, her silver hair catching the dim cockpit light. Who? The droids? Elliot shook his head. Worse. That's a bounty hunter signature. The realization sent a chill through Lyria. They're coming for me. And me, Elliot added grimly. When you embarrass a high-end establishment like the Blue Solarium, they don't just let it slide. The ship's alarm blared as the pursuing vessel locked onto them. Elliot cursed under his breath, tightening his grip on the controls. Hold on. Things are about to get bumpy. The hunter arrives. The bounty hunter's ship emerged from hyperspace, a sleek, menacing craft armed with an array of weaponry. It was far more advanced than the Starhopper, its angular design and glowing thrusters cutting through the darkness like a predator closing in on its prey. A transmission crackled over the comms. A deep, gravelly voice filled the cockpit. Attention, Starhopper. This is Varnax, bounty hunter authorized by the Nebula Syndicate. You are harboring stolen property. Surrender the girl, and I might let you live. Elliot snorted, his hands dancing across the controls to prime the ship's shields. Not happening, Varnax. Find another meal ticket. There was a pause before Varnax replied, his voice dripping with amusement. Brave. Stupid, but brave. Let's see how long you last. The hunter's ship fired without warning, a barrage of plasma bolts streaking toward the Starhopper. Elliot yanked the controls, sending the ship into a sharp dive. The plasma blasts narrowly missed, lighting up the void behind them. Dogfight in the stars. The Starhopper jolted as Varnax's second volley of plasma fire grazed its hull. Elliot gritted his teeth, pulling the ship into a tight barrel roll. Lyria gripped the edges of her seat, her eyes wide with fear. Can't this thing go any faster? She asked, her voice trembling. She's not built for speed, Elliot replied, glancing at the status display. The Starhopper's shields were holding for now, but it wouldn't take much more. But she's got a few tricks. Flipping a switch on the console, Elliot activated the chaff dispersal system. A burst of reflective particles exploded from the ship's rear, temporarily blinding Varnax's targeting systems. Seizing the opportunity, Elliot veered toward a nearby asteroid field. "Are you insane?" Lyria exclaimed as the Starhopper plunged into the dense cluster of spinning rocks. "Probably," Elliot admitted, "but it's our best shot." The asteroid field was a chaotic maze of tumbling debris, illuminated by the light of a distant star. Elliot navigated with practiced precision, threading the Starhopper through narrow gaps and using the asteroids as cover. Behind them, Varnax's ship pursued relentlessly, its larger frame struggling to maneuver in the confined space. A risky maneuver. As they weaved through the asteroid field, Lyria watched the scanner display, her anxiety mounting. "He's still gaining on us." Elliot frowned, his mind racing. The Starhopper didn't have the firepower to take on Varnax directly, but the asteroid field offered an opportunity. If he could lure the bounty hunter into a tight enough space, he might be able to turn the terrain to their advantage. "I've got an idea," he said, "but it's going to be close." "What kind of idea?" Lyria asked, her voice edged with panic. Elliot didn't answer. He angled the Starhopper toward a massive asteroid with a deep fissure running through its center. The crack was barely wide enough for the ship to fit through, and jagged rocks jutted from its edges like teeth. "You can't be serious," Lyria said, realizing his plan. "Trust me," Elliot replied, his focus unshakable. With a steady hand, he guided the Starhopper into the fissure. The ship's hull scraped against the rocky walls, sparks flying as they hurtled through the narrow passage. Behind them, Varnax's ship followed, its weapons firing sporadically. Elliot timed his next move perfectly. As the Starhopper emerged from the fissure, he fired a plasma charge into the asteroid's interior. The explosion sent a cascade of rocks collapsing into the fissure, sealing it behind them. The scanner display showed Varnax's ship grinding to a halt, trapped on the other side of the debris. Lyria let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with relief. "For now," Elliot said, his tone cautious. "But he'll find another way out. We need to disappear." A refuge and a revelation. Elliot set the Starhopper on a course for a nearby moon, its atmosphere thick enough to mask their ship's signature. They landed in a secluded canyon, the terrain rocky and desolate. The ship's engines powered down, and silence settled over them. Lyria followed Elliot into the cargo hold, where he rummaged through a storage locker. He handed her a ration pack and a blanket, his expression softening. "You okay?" he asked. Lyria nodded, though her eyes were distant. "I don't know how to thank you. You risked your life for me." Elliot shrugged, leaning against the bulkhead. "You didn't deserve what they were doing to you. No one does." She hesitated before speaking again. "You should know. I'm not just a random captive. My people what's left of them are in hiding. The Tyvalan Syndicate hunts us because we refuse to be bred for consumption." Elliot's stomach churned. He'd heard whispers of such atrocities, but had never thought they were real. "That's horrifying." Lyria nodded, her luminous eyes meeting his. "They'll never stop. Not until we're all gone. Or until someone stops them." Elliot straightened, determination hardening his features. "Then maybe it's time someone did." The beginning of a mission. As the Starhopper sat hidden beneath the moon's rocky cliffs, Elliot and Lyria began to plan. The Syndicate's operations stretched across the galaxy, but Lyria knew of a resistance movement scattered survivors working in secret to dismantle the network of slavery and consumption. "They'll need allies," Lyria said, "and someone like you could make a difference." Elliot smiled faintly. "A scrappy pilot with a half-broken ship? I'm not exactly hero material." Lyria placed a hand on his arm, her gaze steady. "You already are. You saved me." Elliot's resolve solidified. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he couldn't turn his back on Lyria or the countless others who needed help. "All right," he said. "Let's find your people, and then we'll take the fight to the Syndicate." As the stars glittered above, the two of them stood side by side, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them. Chapter 4. Breaking the Chains. Finding the Resistance. The Starhopper glided through the dense fog of Ulyss 4, a swampy moon on the fringes of Tyvalan space. The terrain was treacherous, its surface dotted with bubbling pools of toxic water and dense thickets of towering, bioluminescent trees. This was where Lyria claimed her people's resistance was hiding, a place no syndicate agent would dare to tread. Elliot squinted at the NAV display, the faint beacon they had tracked flickering weakly. Are you sure this is the right place? It feels like the kind of place people come to disappear and never come back. Lyria, seated beside him, nodded. That's the point. The syndicate can't hunt us here. Elliot adjusted the ship's thrusters to descend carefully through the thick canopy. The Starhopper landed on a rocky outcropping near a glowing lagoon, the faint hum of its engines dissipating into the stillness. As the hatch opened, a cool, damp air filled the cabin. We'll need to proceed on foot, Lyria said, stepping out. Her gaze scanned the misty forest, her luminous eyes reflecting the faint blue glow of the vegetation. Elliot grabbed his gear, slinging a plasma pistol across his chest. Lead the way. They trekked through the swamp, their footsteps muffled by the spongy ground. Lyria seemed to know the way, guiding them past hidden sentry posts and encrypted signals that marked the Resistance's perimeter. After what felt like hours, they reached a large, camouflaged structure nestled among the trees. It was a mix of advanced technology and scavenged materials, its walls bristling with defensive turrets. Two guards emerged, their weapons trained on Elliot and Lyria. Identify yourselves, one of them barked, a tall alien with mottled green skin and piercing yellow eyes. Lyria stepped forward, her hands raised. I'm Lyria, of the Tyvalan refugees. I've brought help. The guards exchanged a glance before lowering their weapons. Come with us. Meeting the Resistance. Inside the structure, Elliot was struck by the sheer scale of the operation. The Resistance base buzzed with activity, a diverse group of aliens working together to monitor syndicate movements, repair equipment, and coordinate covert operations. Maps of Tyvalan-controlled systems were projected onto walls, red dots marking key syndicate installations. They were led to a central chamber, where a tall, regal alien woman awaited them. Her skin was a shimmering gold, and her eyes glowed faintly with an inner light. She introduced herself as Commander Valus, leader of the Resistance. Lyria, Valus said warmly, embracing her. We feared the worst when you were taken. I was lucky, Lyria replied, glancing at Elliot. I had help. Valus turned her attention to Elliot, her expression unreadable. And who are you? Elliot Mercer, he said. Pilot, traitor, and, apparently, the guy who really knows how to piss off the syndicate. Valus allowed a faint smile. We've heard about the incident at Nebula Station 17. You've made enemies in high places. I've noticed, Elliot said dryly, but I didn't come here to hide. Lyria told me what the syndicate's doing. I want to help stop them. Valus studied him for a moment before nodding. Good. We could use someone with your skills. The plan. The Resistance had been gathering intelligence on the syndicate's operations for years, but their resources were limited. The syndicate controlled vast networks of resources and ships, and their reach extended across countless systems. Taking them down would require precision and boldness. Our biggest obstacle is their prime processing facility, Valus explained, pointing to a red on the map. That's where they process captives into commodities. It's heavily fortified, but if we can take it out, it would cripple their operations. Elliot frowned. Sounds like a suicide mission. It would be, Valus admitted. Unless we can deactivate their defenses first. That's where you come in. She outlined the plan. Elliot and Lyria would infiltrate a nearby syndicate outpost to steal access codes for the facility's defenses. Once the codes were acquired, the Resistance could mount a coordinated assault on the facility. It's risky, Valus said, but if we succeed, we'll save thousands of lives and send a message to the galaxy that the syndicate isn't invincible. Elliot glanced at Lyria, who nodded resolutely. We're in, he said. Infiltrating the outpost. The syndicate outpost loomed ahead, a sprawling complex surrounded by turrets and patrols. Elliot and Lyria crouched in the shadows, their breaths visible in the cold night air. The Resistance had provided them with stealth suits, their sleek black material rendering them nearly invisible in the darkness. Ready? Elliot whispered. Lyria nodded, clutching a compact hacking device. Let's do this. They slipped past the perimeter, their movements silent and deliberate. Elliot's heart pounded as they navigated through the maze of corridors, evading guards and surveillance drones. Lyria's knowledge of syndicate protocols proved invaluable, allowing them to bypass security checkpoints with ease. They reached the central control room, where a massive terminal displayed streams of encrypted data. Lyria got to work, her fingers flying across the interface as she extracted the access codes. "Hurry," Elliot urged, glancing at the door. "I'm almost there," Lyria replied, her voice steady despite the tension. The sound of approaching footsteps made Elliot's stomach drop. A squad of syndicate enforcers was closing in. "We've got company," he said, drawing his plasma pistol. "Got it," Lyria exclaimed, disconnecting the device. "Let's go." Elliot fired a few shots to cover their retreat, the plasma bolts lighting up the corridor. They sprinted back the way they came, alarms blaring as the outpost went into lockdown. By the time they reached the perimeter, the Resistance's extraction team was waiting. The final assault. With the access codes in hand, the Resistance launched their assault on the prime processing facility. The battle was fierce, the Syndicate's forces putting up a brutal defense. Elliot piloted the Starhopper through a storm of enemy fire, providing air support as Resistance fighters stormed the facility. Lyria worked alongside the ground team, using the stolen codes to disable the facility's automated defenses. The moment the shields went down, the Resistance unleashed their full arsenal, overwhelming the Syndicate forces. By the end of the day, the facility lay in ruins. Thousands of captives were freed, and the Syndicate's operations suffered a devastating blow. A new beginning. In the aftermath of the battle, the Resistance gathered to celebrate their victory. For the first time in years, there was hope that the Syndicate's reign of terror could be ended. Elliot stood on a hillside overlooking the facility's wreckage, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows. Lyria joined him, her expression one of quiet gratitude. "You didn't have to stay," she said, "but you did. And because of you, my people have a chance." Elliot smiled faintly. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us." Lyria placed a hand on his arm. "Thank you, Elliot, for everything." He looked at her, the weight of the journey they'd shared settling over him. "I'm not done yet. There's still work to do." Together, they turned to face the horizon, ready to continue their fight for freedom and for a better galaxy.